So I think it's okay to recognize that this run has been dominant without also saying that they have been as dominant as the 2017 Warriors. I think it's okay. It's not taking away anything from them at all. Because regardless of who's in front of you, it is hard to win a championship. There have been teams that have had the luxury of having easy paths and still didn't win the goddamn ring. Welcome back to the Kenny Beecham podcast on maybe the eve of the end. Like, I'm filming this the day before the Celtics could potentially complete the sweep in the NBA Finals. Up 3-0. Tomorrow could be the end of the season. That's crazy, bro. I honestly feel like it wasn't too long ago where Zach LaVine dropped 50 against the Detroit Pistons and we lost. And I made a video saying, oh, the Pistons look kind of nice this season. That feels like yesterday. And the season is about to be over. It might not happen tomorrow. You know, Dallas might give it a game or two or three, but history says they won't give it 4. So congratulations to the Boston Celtics on being the 2023-2024 NBA champions, y'all. It is official. Feels like a long time coming, but at the end of the day, it's not official. It's as official as it can be without it being official. You feel me? But a potential 16-2 finals run. 16-2 will put them in an elite group of teams. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like they deserve to be in that group of team. We're going to talk about that. That's just me teasing some things for a little bit later. I need you to leave a like on the episode, subscribe to the channel, tell a friend that, well, the season might be over, but you might still want your basketball fix. We about to start talking about the NBA draft. That's like 10-ish days away or something like that. And then we'll have free agency. And then we'll have summer league. And then we'll have the Olympics. So men's basketball is going to continue to go for a while. You still got the W. Shout out to the W to hold us down. Big 3 starting up very soon, holding it down. So we will have hoops. Don't get me wrong. We will have hoops. But something about this league just keeps me like that. So it is bittersweet that we are coming to a potential end. Let's get to this dominant run for the Boston Celtics because I fell victim to this as well, where after game number 3, I published my video on Kenny For Real. I always want my Kenny For Real video and the Kenny Beecham podcast to be complimentary and not feel like it's overlapping. Again, I understand that sometimes there is overlap, and I apologize for that, but it is what it is. But in my game 3 recap, after I published the video and rewatched it, I was like, I really didn't mention the Celtics too much, did I? Instead of us talking about how good the Boston Celtics have been this entire run, or the fact that they've held the Boston Celtics to under 100 points 3 games in this final so far, all 3 games in this final so far, my conversation, the conversations that were on TV, on other podcasts, and so on and so forth, has been more geared to the fact that Luka Doncic fouled out in the first game of the season for him. I think 3rd time of his entire career. It's about the officiating a little bit. It's about a lot of different things outside of the Boston Celtics. Again, I am guilty of that as well. So let me give the flowers to the Boston Celtics because, again, they are 1 game away from what, banner 18? Is that the right number or is it 19 at this point? I don't know. They got so many banners I done lost track. Some of us, I'm lucky to have 6, even though only 3 of those 6 happened in my lifetime. Either way, they are on the road to another championship. And it kind of feels like that has been the case for the Boston Celtics this entire year. And at this point, I'm just talking about myself. I can't talk about any other shows. I'm only talking about myself. Where the Boston Celtics have been so very consistently great and consistently dominant that there is nothing really to talk about outside of saying this team is really, really good. This league thrives on drama. It thrives on player movement. It thrives on a lot of different things. And consistently being good is not necessarily one of those things. So again, it's been a team that I've said since the moment that they acquired Jrue Holiday, that was a team I was picking to win the finals from that very moment on. And here we are 1 game away from it being the fact. They're a team that I've consistently believed in. Like, I haven't wavered whatsoever, but I felt more inclined to kind of talk about some other stuff, to talk about some other teams. They've just been doing it. And part of it might be because we've seen them. Have we seen them be this? We have not, even though they have 6 conference finals appearances in 8 years, we've never seen them be this good or this dominant. But in my mind, because we have seen this team make to the conference finals, we did see them make a championship run in 2022 and end up losing and stuff. Them being regular season good was really solid, but it was like, okay, can we get the championship now? Because in the Brown and Tatum era, and again, these guys are 26 and 27 years old. You could argue they ain't even hit their primes just yet. But we are just so consistently like normalized to them being a great duo, them being in the playoffs every single season. Like Jason Tatum is on pace to have the second most playoff points in the history of basketball. He's on pace for that. Now, will he get that? I've been seeing how he's been shooting this series. I don't know. But he's on pace for that. That's how much he's been in the playoffs, and that's how good his teams have been throughout the course of his career. So them being a team that could potentially be, 80-20? If they win tomorrow, they'd be 80-20 this season. They won 4 out of every 5 games this year. That's an incredible, incredible streak. And based on the numbers as of right now, they have the 11th best point differential in playoff history. But at the same time, I look at those teams around them. It's 2016 Cavs. It's 2017 Golden State Warriors. It's 2013 Spurs. It's 2001 LA Lakers. These teams that were so very dominant and eventually ended up really competing to a game 7 and maybe losing, or getting to a championship and dominating. It's hard for me to put that Celtics team in the same light as those other teams. And what I will say to that is completely okay. Everything doesn't have to be black and white. We can recognize that this has been a dominant run, but also saying, yeah, they ain't played against nobody too crazy, but that's not taking away from what they've done. They were down by 20 points in game number 3 in the third quarter versus the Indiana Pacers. And what did they do? They won that game. The Miami Heat hit a legendary amount of threes, 23 threes, the most they've ever seen in a playoff game in their franchise history. What did they do? They fought back and beat them by like 100 over the next 2 games. So I think it's okay to recognize that this run has been dominant without also saying that they have been as dominant as the 2017 Warriors. I think it's okay. It's not taking away anything from them at all. Because regardless of who's in front of you, it is hard to win a championship. There have been teams that have had the luxury of having easy paths and still didn't win the goddamn ring. So it's a testament to them being completely locked in. Again, the 11th best point differential is hard to do throughout history. It is so very easy to get complacent, and you could argue that in that fourth quarter, that 6-minute stretch was a 20-2 run, that they got complacent. There were a lot of ugly shots. There were a lot of, oh my God, what is happening moments. But it's easy when you are a team like them that have had success to almost the highest degree, multiple years, for them to go into a regular season and end up as the 3 seed. To go into the postseason and see Jimmy Butler's not playing and fall 2 games, to see Donovan Mitchell is out, fall 2 games, to see no Tyrese Halliburton and lose a game. They have not done that. And with Luka being beat up and the Mavericks just not having the supporting cast, they've taken full advantage of things. And that is pretty dope. That is pretty dope. And before the series started, Jason Tatum was asked about having the experience of being here before, and how much, and he responded about how much that first run in 2022, right? That was right here in 2022 is really gonna impact the way he has impacted the way he's thought about basketball and prepared for basketball since then. And you can see it in the moment. Now, right now, Jaylen Brown, if you go to FanDuel Sportsbook, Jaylen Brown is the favorite to win Finals MVP, and I think that makes sense. Jaylen Brown has been the better player in this playoffs. And in a game 3, was it 30 points, 8 assists, and like 7 rebounds? That's a ridiculous game for Jaylen Brown, especially when things were sputtering and the Mavericks were on that run. Jaylen Brown had 2 possessions where he settled some things down. One of them was a jump shot over Tim Hardaway Jr. Like at this point in time, he deserves to be the favorite to win the Finals MVP. But I still don't just look at the counting stats or the shooting numbers and say that Tatum has had a bad series. These 2 dudes work in tandem. Like in game number 3, that was one of my favorite collective games between these 2 guys. I thought that they both played off each other so very well. I thought that when Jaylen Brown got that super monster dunk, I know there was some conversations on ESPN about Jason Tatum is happy for the man. They cut to Jason Tatum. He was ecstatic. When there was one drive and kick where Kyrie Irving got lost in the right corner and Jason Tatum kicked it out to Jaylen Brown and Jaylen Brown hit the 3. Jason Tatum celebrated. Does Jason Tatum do this or this? I feel like this is the Dirk thing. But other people do this too. Either way, when he hit the 3, he celebrated as if he hit the 3. Like, it's always been a thing in the media to try to break these 2 guys apart. I don't think that's the reality of their situation. Honestly, of course, Jason Tatum wants to win Finals MVP. That's a legacy-defining thing, to be known as the best player in a Finals. But in this one specifically, it has been Jaylen Brown by about if about 10% or so, maybe 15% or so. Because I think a lot of it has to do with, we know Jaylen Brown can get buckets. We know he's aggressive if he sees a mismatch. We know he can get to the basket at will, specifically if he has a guy in front of him that he don't really believe in. But the playmaking we've seen from him over the last 2 games, and granted, in game number 2, he did end up with like 7 assists, 6 turnovers, if I remember the number correctly. But I thought that his playmaking has hit in this series another level. And part of that is they're starting to defend him a little bit differently than in game number 1, where he wasn't looked to pass because there was no reason to. It was single coverage and everything. So the fact that Jaylen Brown has had this playmaking bump and his defense has still been incredible. As of right now, before game number 4, he is my finals MVP. It's not set in stone. If Tatum go out there and drop 50 of them things, I think it could be a conversation. But either way, I think that whether it's Brown or Tatum winning that finals MVP, the other guy is going to be ecstatic because that championship changes the way you are perceived. At least it should. I mean, I can't speak for the people on Twitter. At this point, I've grown out of NBA Twitter. I don't know. I'm 28. I'm going on 28 this year. I enjoy memes. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy a good meme. I enjoy a good joke geared towards a player when you recognize that it's a joke, but some of the conversation is just a little bit too wild. And these guys have been winners their entire career, right? I truly believe that you can be a winner without a ring, because winning a championship, and no matter the sport, is the hardest thing possible to do. So there are players throughout history with 0 championships that I can firmly say that guy has been a winner throughout his career. And these 2 guys have been winners throughout their entire career so far. And now they're 1 game away from getting the thing that cements that. 1 championship, there's no conversation of whether or not you're a winner or not, especially this early in it. I mean, again, we're at 26 and 27, which is for at least Jaylen Brown, it's relatively early for that finals run. That would be one of the youngest finals MVPs without me looking at the list. I know some guys at the top of mind that have done it, but one of the youngest finals MVPs at 26 years old. And these 2 guys have just been working very well together. There's a period of time in their careers where there's like real legitimate, and this is by our reports and some articles that I've read throughout the years, that there was a real chance that they were going to try to split these guys up. Not going into the season, but like years ago when this team had just more talent on the roster, and it was like, oh, these young dudes, they're 22 and 23 years old. They're both wings that can get buckets, but they have overlapping skill sets. Will we be able to cash in on Jaylen Brown in order to trade for Kevin Durant, which was just like, that was like 2 years ago. Will we be able to cash in on Jaylen Brown to acquire Kawhi Leonard after his thing with the Spurs when he was readily available? Like, there were real conversations on whether or not they would keep this duo together. And they stuck to it and said, hey, these guys are so young, we don't know who they can be as players. And the reality is, who they can be as players is Tatum can be a top 10 player in basketball, and Jaylen Brown could be top 15, top 20, depending on who you ask. And Jaylen Brown could be a guy that can play as if he's top 10, depending on the circumstances. The overlapping skill set thing might have been the case when they were younger players, but at this portion of their career, they're complementary. To have 2 wings who can switch everything at this point, the way I'm watching Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown guard the potential lob opportunities or the way they rebound makes me feel pretty solid about them being able to switch pretty much through everything. For them to both be players that can create their own shot, for Tatum to evolve as a playmaker as he has, these guys feel like a duo that should be together for a very, very long time, considering now Jaylen Brown is a game away from being a finals MVP and has one of the biggest contracts in NBA history. There's no question about his own, what's the word for his own validation. Because at this point, what much more can I do? I was all NBA player last year, all NBA second team, if I remember correctly. I helped lead a team to the finals, and then I won finals MVP. I've already been paid. There's no, like, sometimes you see a player, specifically when you talk about 2 younger players, they grow apart because one of them wants to see what they could do if they weren't under the other, or if they weren't sharing the duties. I don't think that's really a question anymore. Like, I don't fear that in a year from now, Jaylen Brown will request a trade because he wants his own team, because this is his team. It's simultaneously Jason Tatum's team too, but this is like a weird combination that we very rarely see in this sport, when you see a number two be able to feel like a number one for a 15 to 16 game stretch. And the guy that was normally known as the number one is completely okay with it. That's dope. I do believe that Jason Tatum's still a better player. I do believe that Jason Tatum is still the number one, considering the responsibilities he has as a playmaker, as a facilitator, and all these type of things. But there's no thought in my mind that I think that this could be broken up anytime soon. But I mean, I've been wrong on things like this before. But it's just so cool to see these dudes get to this point. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Derrick White. Because I remember 2 years ago, or was that last year? Last year in the playoffs, so they got against the Miami Heat. So that was last year conference finals. They go down 0-3, yada, yada, yada. I remember watching that series, and there were a few of those games where it felt like, and I vividly remember on the broadcast, he was open in a corner. Wow, we were in, this is Miami, so this is, no, this is home. So this is game number 1 or game number 2 of that series. And he gets a pass in the corner, and he hesitates to take a shot. And I remember them saying, that's a shot Derrick White normally would take. And it felt as though in somewhere throughout that finals run that he had, or throughout that playoff run, that he had completely lost his offensive identity in a way. Teams weren't respecting him as a shooter because, again, think about who else was on that roster. There are a lot of players that you respect, and this is just the way basketball, you pick and choose your battles, and the other teams were deciding, hey, Derrick White being able to shoot that three-point shot, we're okay with him being able to do that. In this game, Derrick White hit that one bank shot three straight ahead. And I was just thinking to myself, the progression of Derrick White throughout the course of his career has been so very ridiculous and one to be talked about. And then I woke up this morning, because a lot of these things are notes that I had for this episode. And then I woke up this morning and I saw a report that his trainer said the secret sauce to Derrick White becoming the player that he's become is that in 16 years of training, he has missed one workout. In 16 years of training, he has missed one singular workout. Persistence, consistency, all of these type of things. So for him to be able to be one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball, even though I thought in game number 3, Luka felt real comfortable with like trying to get that switch because he's just bigger than Derrick White. But I think he held his own a few different times. He even got the big block that led to the Jason Tatum dunk. That probably was a foul. Not probably, it definitely was a foul. But that was a guy that they got for Romeo Langford, another first-round pick that turned into Malachi Branham, if I'm not mistaken. Just a guy that we knew was solid with the Spurs. I don't think many of us expected for him to be a media darling, because I remember at the All-Star break, specifically my guy JJ Redick was like, that guy's an All-Star. That guy's an All-Star. Him to become one of the media advanced stats darlings. Maybe not media darling, that's a stretch. Advanced stats darlings. So he's become an advanced stats darling. He was already a good defender, but he's become one of the better defenders, one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball, and has hit some really, really big shots. Some really, really. Now, he also hit a game winner in that Miami Heat series too from a year ago. So I don't want to act like he was completely a non-factor or anything. But still, he has just been phenomenal. And he is up for a contract extension, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't see a world where he's not on the Boston Celtics. All of the money that they're going to be paying is just worth it at the end of the day, even if they just get one. So shout out to D White for really never wavering and just really being consistent. And he's gonna get a big payday. Jrue Holiday. It's going to go to the question that Joel Embiid asked late last night on Twitter, where the exact tweet, I don't remember it verbatim, but it was something along the lines that, did Milwaukee gift the ring to the Boston Celtics? Of course, referring to the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks traded Jrue Holiday to the Portland Trail Blazers in a package revolving around Damian Lillard. And then the Portland Trail Blazers in a couple days' time traded him to the Boston Celtics for Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and, if I'm not mistaken, 2 first-round picks. One of the picks that they got back from the Porzingis trade. Remember, they got 2 first-round picks in the Porzingis trade. So Joel Embiid is asking, did Milwaukee just give them the championship? I think it's a valid question. Obviously, Milwaukee could not have controlled what the Blazers decided to do with Jrue Holiday. But I would assume that they didn't expect him to end up on one of their rivals. Now, it would probably hurt a little bit more if those two teams saw each other in the playoffs, if Giannis was healthy and they lost or something like that. I don't think they think about it too much in this time. I don't think Giannis is looking at his front office like, what did you do? It's not one of those situations. Because at the end of the day, the idea for the Milwaukee Bucks was Giannis has been on 2 different podcasts where he said he just wants to win no matter where it's at. We need to do something to make him happy. He has not signed that contract extension we put in front of him a couple weeks ago. What can we do? And what they did was traded one of the guys. I mean, Jrue Holiday has said that he wanted to retire a Milwaukee Buck, right? That was like 2 weeks before he got traded. They traded one of the dudes that was beloved in the locker room, beloved and the fan base, I want to say, even though I think they kind of turned on him after he was traded. It was like, oh, look at these stats. When we were in the playoffs, he was significantly worse. But when he was in the finals, he got the steal and threw that lob to Giannis, and we loved him then, and then we hated him, but we didn't love him as much. Either way. And they in turn got Giannis to sign his extension, right? If you would have said, let's go back in history. If you would have told John Horst, who I think is still in charge over there, you're going to trade for Damian Lillard. But when you trade for him, Jrue Holiday is going to end up on the Boston Celtics. How do you feel about that? He probably doesn't like the idea. He's probably double thinking whether or not he wants to do this trade. Because at this point in time, they already have Porzingis. So this is like the final piece other than Xavier Tillman. Shout out to Xavier Tillman. He probably thinks about it a few different times, right? He probably is tossing and turning in his sleep for nights leading up to the final decision. But if you also told him that this is the way you get Giannis to sign that extension, I think that is the moment in time where he says, fuck it, we ball. And they do the trade. Because at the end of the day, when you're a small market team like the Milwaukee Bucks, and you have a player that could potentially end up top 20 of all time, top 15 of all time. I mean, he's got potential to go higher. He's still, I don't even think he's hit 30 just yet. Giannis is still a baby in NBA terms. When you have a guy like that in a smaller market who was in conversations for the best player in the league for multiple years, you do everything in your power to keep that guy in your city. Even if that means that one of the years after you make a big trade, your division or your conference rival wins a championship. You get him to sign an extension. It's kind of all that matters. Because whether or not Damian Lillard looked great in his first season, or whether or not Chris Middleton was regressing, or whether or not Brook Lopez was regressing, it's not that important to us at the moment in time. The thing that's number one on our priority list is to keep Giannis. And if Brook Lopez is regressing, we'll figure out what to do with that. If Chris Middleton is regressing, even though he's great in the playoffs, we'll figure out what to do with that. The one guy, that guy up top, is Giannis. And the fact that they felt okay with trading Jrue Holiday lets me know in mind there is no stone that they will leave unturned if that means that we feel comfortable with our team around Giannis. On paper, Giannis and Damian Lillard thing makes a lot of sense. Of course, they went through a lot of coaching stuff, a lot of things. So the original question, did Milwaukee gift them the ring? They played a huge part in it, don't get me wrong. Did they gift it to him? Probably. So the idea. So the question is, what's the alternative, right? There were other teams that were interested in Jrue Holiday from all reports back then, and the Trailblazers opted to go with the first round pick and then 2 players that they feel like they can trade again for more first round picks. That is yet to be seen. Michael Brogdon's still on the roster. Robert Williams got injured like 2 games into his season, and boom, boom, boom. Now, who knows? Both of those guys dealt with injuries this season. Will they be able to get first round picks for these guys, or will they continue to try to build with Robert Williams, which I think is what they said to the public? We don't know if that's the truth. If that trade doesn't go down and Jrue Holiday is traded, let's just say to some team out west to keep the Eastern Conference. Do the Celtics still win the championship? I don't know. That's a question for y'all. I don't know. Because it goes into seedings, right? Where do they end up seed? Do they still end up being the most dominant team in the Eastern Conference? I think they won the Eastern Conference by 14 games. Is that 14 games all Jrue Holiday? So they might still end up as the 1 seed without Jrue Holiday on the roster. But then they traded away Marcus Smart in the Porzingis trade. So who is starting there? Is that Peyton Pritchard and Derrick White? I don't know. It's the butterfly effect that they gift them the ring. They played a significant part in it because Jrue Holiday had decent odds to win the Finals MVP after game number 2 because he was that good. 26 points, 11 rebounds, so on and so. You saw the game. You saw the goddamn game. And his defense, again, just been ridiculous. Even though Kyrie Irving still ended up with 30 plus in this one, his defense has been great the entire time. Also, want to give the flowers to Brad Stevens as we're talking about these trades, because I remember when he opted to step away from coaching and step into the front office job. It is a maneuver that we see quite a bit in basketball, but not necessarily to like one of the top men in power. So, for example, Wes Unseld Jr. was canned or stepped away from the head coach and job of the Washington Wizards to step into a front office job. He's not the guy making the total decision, but somehow he has some type of play. We see this quite a bit. There are other examples across basketball that I can't think about over the last couple of years, but a coach is fired or let go, but he stays within the front office and within the organization. Brad Stevens steps away and he says, I'm going to hire a guy that I think could do just as good as me or better. And I want to take this next challenge on. And of course, it ends up being Ime Udoka, who in the first season under Ime Udoka, they made a finals run. Like Ime was phenomenal. For a guy that was widely renowned as one of the top assistants in basketball, he immediately stepped in and he set a culture. The defense was great. He was doing this, he was doing that, and he immediately made the finals. And in my mind, he was going to be the coach for a very long time in Boston. Obviously, some off the court stuff derailed that. And Joe Mazzulla is a 35-year-old guy who's been an assistant coach for some time. He's put into that seat as the head coach. And I remember before Joe Mazzulla got his contract extension, there were some conversations on whether or not he would just be an interim and they were going to find the real coach, or will they trust this young guy, this young kid, in the terms of the way NBA coaching is? Will they allow him to grow with the team? And it felt like a risky move to have the young guy grow with the team because you have such a win now roster. Can we afford for Joe Mazzulla to continue to learn as a head coach, or should we go out and get a veteran guy that has been here and done that? And they stuck to their guns. They said, Joe is our guy and he's Rain Man. He is crazy, but one thing he cares about more than anything is, I guess, it's his faith and his basketball. That's what he cares about more than anything. And it's paid off. Because one of the main reasons, this is again, the Joe Mazzulla way, is the numbers game. Across this series, all of the stats, a lot of these stats have been relatively flat. Turnovers per game, they're within a couple. Rebounds per game, they're within a couple. Free throws per game, after game number 3, I have not checked, but before game number 3, they were within a couple. Everything else is relatively flat, other than that 3-point thing. And that 3-point thing helped the Mavericks go on a 20-2 run last night, but also it helped the Boston Celtics get out of being down in a 2-20 run. When you start out last game, they outshot the Mavericks by 8 3-pointers. So they started out the game, based on the numbers, down by 24. That's the Mazzulla way. So Brad Stevens to have the confidence in a 35-year-old coach, or I guess 34-year-old coach when he first got the gig, to feel like this is win or go home, to acquire a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, who, again, they got draft picks back for Kristaps because of his health. And here we go. In game number 3, he was not able to suit up because of that health. But to acquire a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, who is an all-star caliber player, to acquire Jrue Holiday, and like in a week span, right? That's how quick all of this all happened, where they reformulated this team? It's just incredible stuff. And we look at the 6 conference finals in 8 years. I feel like we kind of forget how many different versions of this team we've really seen. Of course, Tatum and Brown have been the one consistent, but we saw a Kyrie era, Gordon Hayward, we saw Kemba Walker. Like Tristan Thompson was on the team once upon a time starting. This team was 500 at one point. Like, they got swept in the playoffs by Kyrie Irving and them when he was a Brooklyn Net. This team has gone through so many different versions. The only 2 consistent things has been Tatum and Brown, and I guess Marcus Smart until this season. And Brad Stevens said, hey, man, making the conference finals is cool, but we are also a team, franchise about winning. It's Boston sports, man. We here to win championships. There's no, oh, we almost did it. And he made some really big moves in order to make it a reality. The Xavier Tillman trade, for nothing. And listen, Xavier Tillman, let's not act like Xavier Tillman turned into Charles Barkley or something, but he was so damn good in the minutes. And my question going into game number 3, would it be Kornet? When Kornet plays drop coverage by like a million feet, like he is so far into the drop, which feels dangerous against Luka Doncic. Or will it be Xavier Tillman? And they opted to go Xavier Tillman, and he actually hit a 3-pointer in this game where the crowd went wild. He was great defensively, causing a lot of miss, specifically on Luka Doncic at the paint. And I mean, he was just as good as you can be for a guy that was going into this series cold as hell, to have his number be called. And I'm sure he knew before the game started that he was going to play. But still, shout out Xavier Tillman and shout out to the acquisition, I guess, because that was just one of the ones like, oh, okay. Every other team is trying to gear up for something bigger, and they just brought in Xavier Tillman, and we'll see what that does. It was the right move. It's the right move. So Brad Stevens, maybe he's the real finals VP. I think I made that joke last episode. But yeah, they're still one game away. It's not official, as you know. But shout out to the Boston Celtics for getting it done. The question is after this, going into next season, I guess we don't know what Philadelphia is going to look like. We don't know if the Milwaukee Bucks are going to make any changes. The New York Knicks are going to keep OG Anunoby. Are they going to trade this, that? I would assume that going into next season that the Boston Celtics will still be the favorite to come out East. That's for sure. But only time will tell. We've had crazy off seasons. Again, nobody could have expected Porzingis and Jrue Holiday were going to end up on the Celtics. Could another team go out and buy a bunch of stuff? There are a lot of teams out here with draft capital, young players, so on and so forth. I don't really know. Let's flip it to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, who again are down 0-3. I already talked about it in my Kenny Frill video about the Luka Doncic performance. So I recommend if you want to hear me talk about that, go to that channel. I would just briefly say I didn't enjoy the Luka Doncic game. It was a tough one. I think he missed 6 to 7 straight shots at one point in his game. Some of those being bunnies right at the rim. He was extremely frustrated. One of the more frustrating games we've seen from Luka in some time, where he is yelling at the refs. He's yelling at this coaching staff on the bench. It's a lot of different stuff. And it's a huge burden to have to be the guy on a championship team, specifically this young. Again, shout out Tatum and Brown. They were just in the finals of 2022 when they were about 25 years old. I understand that. But there's a huge burden on his shoulders, and there's a huge contusion on his chest. There's a huge thing on his knee and another on his ankle. He is fighting through a lot of injuries right now. But I thought that the begging for the calls or being frustrated with the refs are one of the reasons why they end up losing this game. Again, another one is that they were down 24 points based on 3-pointers alone. But there were a few times in this game when Luka Doncic opted to not get back on defense, but instead talked to referees, and one of them led to a Sam Hauser dunk, or it's not dunk, Sam Hauser 3. And I think it's going to be a learning experience. You know, majority of people that end up in the finals at this age don't win, and they do get another chance eventually. And because Luka Doncic is that nice of a talent, I do believe that he'll get another chance eventually. But I feel kind of sad about it in the sense that the Western Conference will only get harder and harder to get through. And granted, they went through 350 win teams. If they would have ended up winning a series, we'd be looking at it as one of the most improbable and one of the coolest finals rings of all time. And I think you can say that, but also say this was one of the cooler conference runs in recent history. To go against the Clippers team that I think it was like 50-50 odds because nobody knew what Kawhi Leonard was going to do. And then boom, they win that one. They went against the young OKC Thunder. I picked the OKC Thunder in that series. They beat that team. Everybody's riding the high of Minnesota beating the Denver Nuggets. Majority of people picked the Minnesota Timberwolves. They beat that. Like, it is a very good run. And I'm not taking that away from them because, again, there are so many teams that don't even get to this point where they can even compete for that championship. So I want to give them the flowers on this run collectively. Ultimately, I think those injuries really caught up to Luke, and the other team is taking advantage of it. I mean, when I talk about turnstile defense for Luka Doncic, that's what it has been this entire series. And in game number 3, it might have been worse than game number 2. And the fouls. He fouled out. And I only read the quote in the podium. I didn't know the inflection in his voice when talking about it being the finals and him having 6 fouls. It didn't read very well, but again, I don't want to form an opinion about it because I haven't heard it. But it was basically about the whistle, and he doesn't want to say this so he doesn't get fined, whatever. Here's the reality of the situation as a guy that watched this game now twice. Some of his fouls were calls that could have gone either way. It could have been a no call, or it could have been a foul on Luka Doncic. Fair. But 3 of those fouls were objectively avoidable. He went into the fourth quarter with only 2 fouls and left with 6. His first foul of the game, he's on the baseline with Jason Tatum, gets stuck, boom, that's a foul. Okay, that was one of the ones that were 50-50. Foul number 2, 100% a foul. Even he looked at the referee, he said, that's one on me. That's the second foul, no big deal. You had 2 fouls. You're going into the fourth quarter. You feel good. If you have 2 fouls going into the fourth quarter, no place in your mind do you think that this player is going to foul out. But instead he did. we have the one play on Peyton Pritchard. He's on top of the key. He's on top of the key, guarding Peyton Pritchard, nobody around him. And Peyton Pritchard gets a step in front of him, so he tries to reach around and to pick the ball loose. That's another foul objectively. The one that could have gone either way is when him and I'm pretty sure it was Jaylen Brown got mixed up on the baseline. That could have been another 50-50 call. And then the last foul, the one that he fouled out on, that was the right call. I think that the 2-minute report is going to say that in a few hours when it comes out. That was the right call. The reality is when you make that much contact from a player, it can't be a no call if the other player falls. Jaylen Brown is the ball handler on this fast break. He gets this contact and he falls. So a whistle has to be blown. They're not just going to let him say, play on. And in that case, because he wasn't set and because he opted to try to, instead of playing normal defense, to try to draw a foul or try to use his hips to get in front, I don't really know what the plan was. That was more indicative of the whole game than anything. The fact that he attempted to play defense this way. And I'm curious of what happens next for the Dallas Mavericks, right? At the deadline, they acquired PJ Washington. They acquired Daniel Gafford. And, well, PJ has not hit a shot since OKC. Hasn't. OKC, he was the greatest shooter of all time. He just was. Next series, struggled again, but don't worry. Everybody got your bag. Luka Doncic hit a step back three-pointer. Derrick Jones Jr. hit a couple games, but he had multiple threes, so on and so forth. And in this series, he still can't hit. And now, in the end of that game, and they were on their 20-2 run, he hit a couple baskets, which I was like, okay, there it is. And they were on their route. I thought they might have been on their route to get rid of that 20-point lead and everything. But 21% from three this series. I think it was 21% from three last series. His whole time in Dallas, he's been struggling to shoot the three outside of the OKC series for the most part. So the question is, what's next? I'm not saying that PJ can't be on this team or same thing with some of these other dudes, but teams are going to get better around you. I just don't know exactly what they do. And part of what they do could be nothing, right? Remember, this team is basically put together in February. I don't know if they should be panicking because they got to the finals and lost, you know? But I also think there's this healthy balance of recognizing what we did was dope as shit, but also recognizing that there are some teams behind us that are getting better that we need to gear ourselves for. The NBA Finals are here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win alongside the champions. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 winning bet. That's $200 to use on same-game parlays, live bets, and so much more. There's no better place to bet on all of the finals action than FanDuel. FanDuel is the only sports book with over 1 million 5-star ratings. Just head over to FanDuel.com/Kenny to take a shot at an extra $200. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Before we get out of here, I want to look at these tweets. I did tweet hashtag AskKB to see if y'all have some questions, but let me check. So I got 3 questions from the community. Shout out to everybody that submitted. The first one comes from Pacers GOAT. Is this draft really that bad, or are we just used to stack draft classes? It's beyond my knowledge to really tell you. I'm usually a guy, and I've said this on many topics and things like that. I usually defer to people that know, right? It would be crazy for me to come out here and say, this is the weakest draft class of all time, when I personally have not done the research on it. What I do recognize is that this is one of the most fluid draft classes of all time, in a sense that I've seen the first overall pick switch like 4 different times on different mocks. I've seen like 7 different players mocked to the Bulls at number 11. So that's kind of cool for me. But what I am doing right now, since the draft is around the corner, and if the Boston Celtics end up winning tomorrow, the next big thing in the NBA is the draft. I am working on having a guest on this show where we can talk draft and I can learn a little bit more. I can ask questions about certain prospects so we can collectively kind of get an idea from someone that I would deem to be very knowledgeable about this year's draft or just drafts in general. But I do have draft classes in my lifetime that were considered weak draft classes that produced Hall of Fame players, all-star caliber players. The number is no draft since 1956 has produced less than 3 all-stars. So if that stays the case, at least 3 of the people that are drafted this season, at least 3, will eventually have an all-star appearance in their career. And I would just go to history on this one. 2013 was widely renowned as a really bad draft class. It produced Giannis at the after the lottery. So I think it's missing that star talent. It's not Zion. It's not Paolo. It's not Victor Wembanyama or these guys that are highly, highly talented that we really think about. When you're tanking for Zion. You're tanking for Victor Wembanyama. This season, many people weren't tanking for Alex Sarr or Zachary Richardson, you know? But those guys could end up being great. Or the guy that's drafted 13th or 17th or 22nd could end up being the best player in the draft class. And I kind of like that idea that it's really dependent on your scouting team. And it's kind of scary as a fan of a team that don't scout very well. But it could be one of those things where you really make your decision not based on the mocks, because I've read articles. It was one on The Athletic from maybe 2 years ago of a draft expert basically saying there are some times where general managers are so afraid to go against a mock that they will pick a player that they personally don't feel amazing with, because they are afraid to go against a mock and reach for a guy and have to explain it to the guy that owns the team. We had this player mocked at 3, and you drafted a guy that wasn't mocked until number 10. What is this about? Even if they felt like the guy number 10 was the guy for them. And with a draft class like this, you can kind of just go where you want with it. I don't know if there will be considered any reaches unless it's a guy that's projected to go 42nd that goes in the lottery. There won't be many reaches in this draft because it's really based on what you like and what you need. Gaddy is the name, says, how do you feel about the impact that social media has had on the NBA, the crazy expectations people have on players nowadays, the random hate, for example, Klay Thompson went 0 for 10 in the relation game memes all over Instagram. Is there more negative than positive? Is there more negative than positive? Yes. I just think that's just how people get interactions on Twitter and things like that. There are some companies / group of people that are trying to change that and have people be more geared towards the enjoyment factor that is sports. I don't let me see what the original question was again. Social media pack has on the NBA. I think the best thing about social media and when it comes to the NBA is that we are able to hear the voices of people that we wouldn't be able to hear the voices of before social media. Right? Before social media, you turn on ESPN, you turn on whatever channel has sports, and whatever was there, that is what you listen to, whether it's your cup of tea or not. And nowadays, you can find a creator, you can find a writer, you can find somebody that is almost specifically geared to the type of content that you like. If you like a quick-witted, funny guy talking about hoops, you can find that. If you like more analytical aspect, you can find that. So the best thing about social media is that it provided variety amongst the sports, all of the sports, but also provide a variety amongst all of the sports. And that could be a bad thing as well. But it also gave us an opportunity to know and learn these players more than we ever really would. I don't know if that's a good thing to some people, but I personally enjoy listening to players give their firsthand accounts on what it's like to be an NBA player, tell stories and stuff like that. And that was something that did not happen in the previous era because social media wasn't a thing. Being a podcaster wasn't really a thing outside of like a few that existed. So has its pros, has its cons. Hell, without social media, you don't know who I am. If you enjoy these content, that's a shout out to social media. So I can't be too hard on it because my whole job has been built in this realm of social media. But I do believe it is a lot more negative than positive. And maybe the only reason I say that is because I only see the negative because that's what gets the likes and that's what gets the retweets and that's what gets people talking, right? If you're a guy that's like overly positive about everything, I don't know if you get the same traction that you would get as if you were more critical than not. So, it's a tough thing to talk about as a guy whose whole life has been in this social media game. The last one comes from Jay Bird that says, how would you improve the NBA Finals coverage? I think there are a lot of different things we could do differently. The first one, and I don't know if this is an ESPN thing or an NBA thing, give me the damn Larry O'Brien on the court, please. Optically, it just makes it all look better. The fake CGI finals that's not actually on the court does not move me. Having the patch on the back of the jersey does not move me. Now, I understand they got their brand set, like they sold their ads on the top. I don't know where you even put it other than the back of the neck. But the jerseys don't feel like a finals jersey because you got to wait for somebody's head to be down for you to even see the patch. I think that ESPN just hasn't done a good enough job at it. Part of it is that it doesn't feel like a show. And I mean, I compare it to their competition in like Turner. Turner obviously has not had the finals, but when halftime comes around, you feel like you should stay in your seat and stay locked into the thing because of the halftime show provides you with something. It provides you with some laughs. It provides you with some memes. Even if the individual coverages between the four guys is never too crazy, it is something that you have fun with. Nowadays, man, the NBA Finals is like, oh my, okay, I think the end of the first half was 51-50, right? 51-50. Paul George is on set with four other people. And PG, what are you seeing out there? Well, Kyrie Irving is being more aggressive. Well, he's got to continue that in the second half. And it's back to commercials where the halftime show is really like a minute or two, and it's not really a show. It's not giving you highlights or key moments of the game, really. It might give you a play here or there. And ultimately, it feels just like a cash grab. And again, as a guy that makes money doing stuff, ads and stuff, I understand it. But when you're at this level where your whole idea is to get people to enjoy the game, fall in love with the sport if they haven't already, to stay locked in, I think it's important that you put out a product during halftime that feels like people that really are able to either digest the game or make it fun. It has to be some type of identity, right? The identity of the Inside the NBA thing is like, we have 3 former NBA players, 2 of them being former goddamn MVPs that are hilarious on the microphone and can give you something witty. We also got 2 guys that can break down some footage if necessary, and Kenny and Ernie, and we got an anchor and Ernie that keep everything like it has its identity, whether you like it or not. And the halftime show for these finals doesn't have an identity other than everybody recognizing that it doesn't really exist. You have Josh Hart on the first bit, and Josh Hart may have said 7 different words in his games that he covered. And then Paul George is there looking spiffy. We didn't really get to experience what Paul George would be like on the microphone because he wasn't able to do anything. So I think bringing back the visual cues that make you feel like the finals, bring back the shows, the cutaways to the people that are breaking down footage and so on and so forth. I think the broadcasting team, I don't want to be too harsh on them because this is their first year collectively working together. I don't know a broadcast team that can be put together on the fly and it be beautiful. It's not bad, don't get me wrong. It's just not what we've been accustomed to for the finals and everything. So there's so many different things that I would do differently, but I'm not in a position of power to do that. And I'm not even saying me being there. I'm just saying, like, behind the scenes, if you asked me to be a consultant, I feel like we could do some cool stuff. But it has not been the case. And yeah, I think that's where we wrap up today's episode. If you enjoyed it, leave it a like, subscribe, and I'll see y'all.